Hey guys, the following is from Tracy Marander regarding her relationship with Kurt Cobain. Quote, I'm not really sure the first time I met him. I remember 2 times. One time was at a party at the 56th Street house in Tacoma. Jim May, who ran the Community World Theater in Olympia, him and a few people lived in a house right by there and would always throw parties. They would charge $2 or $3 to get in and have bands playing. Kurt was with the Melvins, and I remember talking to him. He had a pet rat on his shoulder. And then the other time, I was in my car with my boyfriend at the time in the parking lot of Gorilla Gardens. Him and Buzz were talking to us. I remember how blue his eyes were, and he had a nice smile, and was really friendly. He had a long trench coat on and had kind of short feathered hair. I was friends with Shelley, Chris Novosel's girlfriend at the time. We worked together. I go down to Aberdeen to visit, and we'd see Nirvana practice in Kurt's living room. Kurt's voice was a lot different then, more gravelly and deeper. I had a crush on him. I'd go hang out with Chris and Shelley and him. I would try to hit on him every so often. Shelley's like, he likes you too, but he's kind of shy. Eventually we hooked up and started dating. Shelley started working the graveyard shift with me. Chris was doing some painting jobs during the day. They were trying to find a house in Tacoma or Olympia. During the weekdays, they stayed in our studio apartment. Shelley and I would sleep in there during the day, Chris would be at work, and Kurt would wander around Olympia. Then we'd all have dinner together, and eventually, Chris and Kurt would go to sleep later while Shelley and I went to work. Kurt liked to watch TV. We didn't have cable at the time. We only had one channel. He played music, sit around and play his guitar, or paint pictures. If we could afford to, we'd go to the art store downtown and get canvases for him. If we couldn't, he would paint on the back of board games. He also did a lot of oil pastels and stuff, where he'd draw cartoons and things. We drove in their friend Ryan's panel van to Nirvana's first show, a house party in March of 1987. We all crowded in the back with the equipment. I remember drinking a lot of beer and stealing beer from the fridge. I think a lot of people at that show really didn't like Nirvana. At one point, Chris was on top of their big 70s sort of TV encased in a wood box. Chris was standing on there shirtless. Shelley and I were in front of him running our hands up and down his chest, just to be goofy because everyone seemed like they were uptight. We were trying to be as outrageous as we could. Chris was jumping off the TV and they'd run around the living room and jump off the coffee table. Everyone's like, you're going to break stuff. Eventually, I was critical of the mistakes they'd made. I thought that was kind of stupid because, like I said, everyone was drunk, and at some point they just decided to make it more outrageous, to make an impression, than to play well. Kurt liked Aaron Burkhart's drumming, the drummer in Nirvana at the time. He was a really good drummer. It's just that he had lousy equipment. And unfortunately, things didn't pan out between him and Kurt and Chris. In terms of our personal relationship, eventually, Kurt just fell out of love with me. I think because I didn't play music was a factor in it. I think he wanted to be with somebody he could play music with and collaborate with. He started dating Toby Vale before we officially broke up, and I found another place to live. Kurt and I went out for 3 years. A few months after we broke up, I was angry and didn't want to talk to him at all. It was weird. One day I woke up and I wasn't angry anymore. He came over one time and stayed the night. Nothing happened, we just hung out and went to Java Jive, and he went back home the next day. Another time, he came over. He was dating this girl, Cheryl. My boyfriend and I were watching a movie. It was Jacob's Ladder, and they ruined the ending for us. He was like, hey, is this the movie where blah blah blah? We're like, hey, thanks. Kurt eventually started dating Courtney Love. Whenever Courtney saw me, she was always really nice. I remember at one of Nirvana's shows in Seattle, she was there, and her and I were sitting at the counter of the venue talking. It was really funny. People kept walking by looking at us like they're waiting for us to start fighting at any minute. We were just yakking away. Every few months, he and Courtney would call me really early in the morning, like 2 or 6. He would talk to me for a while, and then Courtney for whatever reason. A lot had changed in Kurt's life. Within like 2 years, we broke up. Kurt got his own place, became a rock star, developed a heroin addiction, got married, and had a kid. That's a lot of stress in a couple of years. I've read stories where supposedly he'd done some heroin around the late 80s, but if he did, I never knew it. There were no symptoms or signs. Ever since I met him, he could fall asleep anywhere easily. He'd be watching TV and fall asleep. Once in a while, he'd smoke pot or drink, but he really didn't smoke pot that much. He was a really good artist. He would draw cartoons with funny sayings. I have this huge picture of this homeless guy, and it's a satirical thing on how homeless people are mentally ill, they're alcoholics, they had messed up childhoods, but they're expected to fend for themselves in a box in the snow. This is on the back of a giant Aerosmith or Zeppelin poster. Whenever he'd send postcards or letters when he was on tour, they usually have a little picture drawn on them. It gets lost sometimes that he was a good artist. It also gets lost that he smiled a lot.